Psychology is a captivating field that delves into the intricacies of the human mind and behavior. Over time, researchers have conducted numerous experiments to unravel the mysteries of our psyche. Yet, some of these experiments have ignited controversy due to their ethical implications and the methodologies employed. Let's delve deeper into 7 of the most contentious psychological experiments in history. In 1971, psychologist Philip Zimbardo initiated the Stanford Prison Experiment at Stanford University to explore the dynamics of power and authority. Zimbardo aimed to investigate how individuals, when placed in positions of power or subservience, would behave in a simulated prison environment. The study involved recruiting volunteers who were randomly assigned roles as either prisoners or guards. Initially, the experiment seemed harmless, but it quickly escalated into a nightmarish scenario. The guards began to exhibit authoritarian behavior, while the prisoners experienced psychological distress. The guards subjected the prisoners to various forms of humiliation, degradation, and even physical abuse. Meanwhile, the prisoners became submissive and compliant, displaying signs of extreme stress and emotional breakdowns. The ethical implications of the Stanford Prison Experiment became apparent as the situation spiraled out of control. Participants endured psychological harm, leading to the premature termination of the study. Critics argued that the experiment lacked proper safeguards to protect participants' well-being and questioned the validity of its findings. Despite its controversial nature, the Stanford Prison Experiment continues to be a focal point in discussions about the ethics of psychological research. Stanley Milgram's obedience experiment, conducted in the early 1960s, sought to investigate the willingness of individuals to obey authority figures, even when it conflicted with their moral beliefs. Participants were recruited for what they believed was a study on memory and learning. They were instructed to administer electric shocks of increasing intensity to another person, an actor, whenever they answered questions incorrectly. The shocking revelation of the Milgram experiment was the high level of obedience displayed by participants. Despite hearing the actor's cries of pain and pleas to stop, a significant portion of participants continued to administer the shocks as directed by the experimenter. The study demonstrated the disturbing extent to which ordinary individuals could commit acts of harm under the influence of authority. However, the Milgram experiment faced criticism for its ethical implications. Participants were subjected to psychological distress, believing they had caused harm to another person. Critics argued that the study breached ethical standards by exposing participants to significant psychological stress without adequate debriefing. Despite these concerns, the Milgram experiment remains a seminal study in understanding obedience and authority. The Little Albert experiment, conducted by John B. Watson and Rosalie Rayner in 1920, aimed to demonstrate the principles of classical conditioning in humans, particularly the acquisition of fear responses. The experiment involved a young boy, known as Little Albert, who was exposed to a series of stimuli to elicit fear. Watson and Rayner conditioned Little Albert to fear a white rat by pairing its presence with a loud, frightening noise. Over time, Little Albert developed a strong fear response to not only the rat but also other similar objects. The experiment showcased the power of associative learning in shaping emotional responses. However, the ethical concerns surrounding the Little Albert experiment are significant. Little Albert was subjected to emotional distress without his consent or understanding of the experiment's purpose. Moreover, the long-term effects of inducing fear in a young child raised ethical questions about the study's implications for psychological well-being. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study, conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service from 1932 to 1972, stands as one of the most egregious examples of unethical research in history. The study aimed to observe the natural progression of syphilis in African American men by recruiting participants from rural Alabama, many of whom were sharecroppers with limited access to healthcare. Despite the availability of penicillin as a treatment for syphilis in the 1940s, participants in the Tuskegee study were denied proper medical care. They were misled into believing they were receiving free healthcare when, in reality, they were left untreated, even as their health deteriorated. The study continued for 4 decades, resulting in unnecessary suffering and deaths among its participants. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study violated basic ethical principles of informed consent, beneficence, and respect for individuals' rights. It perpetuated racial discrimination and exploitation, as the participants were predominantly African American men from disadvantaged backgrounds. The study's revelation in 1972 prompted widespread outrage and led to significant reforms in research ethics regulations. Harry Harlow's experiments with rhesus monkeys in the 1950s and 1960s aimed to investigate the nature of love, attachment, and maternal deprivation. Harlow separated infant monkeys from their mothers shortly after birth and placed them in isolation or with surrogate mothers made of wire or cloth. He observed the monkeys' social and emotional development under these different conditions. Harlow's experiments revealed the profound impact of maternal care on infant development. Monkeys raised with surrogate mothers made of soft cloth exhibited healthier social behaviors and emotional well-being compared to those raised in isolation or with wire mothers. The experiments highlighted the importance of nurturing and affectionate relationships in fostering healthy psychological development. However, Harlow's experiments faced criticism for their ethical implications. The monkeys subjected to maternal deprivation experienced profound psychological distress, exhibiting behaviors indicative of depression, anxiety, and social dysfunction. Critics argued that the suffering inflicted on the monkeys outweighed the scientific insights gained from the experiments, raising ethical concerns about the treatment of research subjects in psychological research.
The model pummeled the doll with a mallet, flung it in the air.
Albert Bandura's Bobo doll experiment, conducted in 1961, aimed to investigate the role of observational learning and aggression in children. Bandura exposed children to a film depicting an adult model behaving aggressively towards a Bobo doll, a large inflatable doll designed to rebound when struck. He then observed the children's behavior when given the opportunity to interact with the doll. The results of the Bobo doll experiment were striking. Children who had observed the aggressive model were more likely to imitate the same aggressive behaviors towards the Bobo doll, compared to children who had not been exposed to the model's behavior. The study demonstrated the influence of media violence and observational learning on children's behavior. However, the Bobo doll experiment raised ethical concerns about the potential for harm to participants. The children were exposed to aggressive behavior, which could have led to the normalization or reinforcement of aggression in their own behavior. Critics argued that exposing children to violent stimuli in a research setting could have detrimental effects on their psychological well-being. The Monster Study, conducted by Wendell Johnson and Mary Tudor at the University of Iowa in 1939, aimed to investigate the effects of positive and negative speech therapy on children's speech development. The study involved children who exhibited minor speech impediments, who were divided into 2 groups, one receiving positive therapy and the other negative therapy. However, the ethical concerns surrounding the Monster Study are significant. The children in the negative therapy group were subjected to criticism, ridicule, and labeling of their speech as monstrous. This treatment had detrimental effects on their self-esteem. As we conclude our exploration of the most controversial psychological experiments in history, it's clear that while these studies have provided valuable insights into human behavior, they've also raised profound ethical questions. From the Stanford Prison Experiment to the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, Each experiment serves as a stark reminder of the importance of ethical considerations in research. If you found this video informative, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button to stay tuned for more thought-provoking content. And remember, while delving into the depths of the human mind is fascinating, it's crucial to always prioritize the well-being and dignity of research participants. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.